in 1998, we had drafted Todd Harvey ninth overall in '93, and he was the first pick in Dallas Stars history. And but in '99, we liked Todd. We liked Todd lots. We had all kinds of Todd, but we had an opportunity to get Mike Keane and Brian Skrudland. Did we just go, yeah, you can have Todd Harvey? No, that was a hard move for us to make. That was really difficult to say we're going to trade somebody that we really believed in and we knew was. But we just looked at what Mike Keane and Brian Skrudland could bring to our group, and so we had to make that decision. So I think you're always balancing out the young versus what you may need, and I think that's where Billy has to balance it out and understand what it is. Because again, you need players to bolster your lineup that can add things, whether it be experience, whether it be a specific area of the team, whether it be all of the above. And young players, they don't all have all that. So you got to evaluate where you're at any particular moment in your team's progression. And I think this team has progressed. Nobody is going to tell you, and you guys know this, you're close to it, that Minnesota isn't a hard team to play against, that they're not a hard out. Like, they're competitive. And that's the first, we talk about Toronto. Toronto wishes they had what Minnesota had in terms of competitive spirit.
Fair. And you talk about trading ninth overall picks, and that is very much at the forefront right now for the Wild. A little bit different because it sounds like you were a little conflicted, and Wild have kind of indicated Marco Rossi's on his way out. Like, what do you think the value is at this point with how the season ended, with what you've seen in his development since being drafted? What's a reasonable return for Marco Rossi?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Let me just go to Marco. I think Marco, let's keep in mind, where he came through during the pandemic and where he lost valuable development time, as did other players. And I think Marco's he's been terrific, I think, in terms of not only the challenges of the pandemic, but then his own personal health issues that he had to deal with. And he went down to Iowa and he went and played and he dug in and he showed that he can be a really good player in the National Hockey League. I don't think there's anybody that looks at Marco Rossi and says, you're not a good player. I think you can clearly see that. So when I look at Marco, and the first thing I'd like to say is this: be careful about trading skill. Be careful. I made a brutal trade, and there was other factors behind it, and not personal, it was more monetary and financial with Mark Savard. And what I should have done is I should have said, no, I'm not trading him. That's not, because it was about just moving money out. And that was the wrong thing to do. And as a manager, you got to stand up to that and say, no, and I didn't. And that was on me, and that's not on anybody else. So with Marco, and Scotty Bowman said to me, he said, that's a pretty skilled player, Craig. Those guys aren't easy to find. So, it's great when you talk about a point in time, but if there's been an intersection of what I would call, I don't want to say irreparable. That sounds like there's damage there, but like where player and team feel they got to go in different directions, that intersection, then you got to look at what it would be. I looked at the Montreal Canadiens. They're dying for a player like Marco Rossi to be their second line center. They're dying to have a guy like that. So, I think, first of all, you look at where a team could benefit from the skill set that Marco adds. And then you start to look, okay, do they have things that we could use in our lineup? What does it mean? And it's not just, you can't just look at it in isolation. You have to look at it and go, okay, if we get a player back and it's an older player that can help us for 2 years and there's money, how does that help us with a contract down the road, have some money, and everything that goes with it? The evaluation isn't just about what you get back in return. That is a part of it, don't get me wrong. But there's so many other factors that go into trading a player and what you're trying to do with your team. But I can't imagine that Marco Rossi would not have value and real good value around the NHL, because there's teams screaming for that type of player.
And it's almost like, be careful if you make a move, those moves are sometimes the best moves are ones you don't make, right? Or you keep a guy versus, trading a guy at different times in his career. I'll
tell you a quick story back to Minnesota days. And we traded, Jack Ferreira was the general manager, and traded for Larry Murphy and Mike Gartner. And was part of our team. Well, then we had ownership change. New general manager came in, Bob Clark. And Larry Murphy, who was with our team in training camp, we were chatting, and he said to me, he goes, "I'm going to get traded." I'm like, "What do you mean you're going to get traded? You're not getting traded. You're too good." He goes, "No, I don't think the manager likes me." And I go, "What? Why would he like you?" And he goes, I don't know. I just don't know. Well, in November, we traded Larry Murphy to Pittsburgh. And I don't know if it was 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks or 4 weeks, but we were on a call and we were trying to find a player that was like Larry Murphy. Dennis Patterson, who was our chief scout at the time, we're going through these players. Well, this guy, that guy. Finally, Dennis goes, we just traded a pretty good one a couple of weeks ago, and the call ended. And we traded for Kevin Hatcher. He just wasn't a fit for us. It wasn't until we got Sergei Zubov that we finally replaced Larry Murphy. Yeah, 5.5 years later.